Welcome to the FanDuel Racing Risen Star Preview Show. For our show, I'm Todd Trupp at the Walter Washington Wolfman Memorial Park. The Wolfman was a local figure around here, and this neighborhood is just outside the gates of the fairgrounds in New Orleans, and it is at Historic Fairgrounds on Saturday that we will have the biggest point opportunity so far on the Kentucky Derby prep season, with a total of 105 points on the line in the Risen Star. Joining me here in New Orleans to talk about the big Kentucky Derby prep race on Saturday at the fairgrounds, Scott Hazelton from downtown New Orleans. Also in his very similar location is Joaquin Jaime, and just about 100 yards from me on the backside here at the fairgrounds, Andy Biancone with one of our key contenders, Vassimo. But let's start with the big news that came out yesterday regarding the field. Jonathan's Way is not going to go. Jonathan's Way was considered one of the key contenders in this race. Scott Hazelton, what do you know about the absence of Jonathan's Way?
Well, it was something along the lines of a blood count not coming back right. So obviously, we know that these horses are constantly monitored. They're constantly looked over by various vets and things of that nature, just to make sure that everything is good to go. And it sounds like something came up a little bit off. And as we know, if it's just slightly off, it's just an athlete cannot perform at their top level. So that sounds like what's going on with Jonathan's Way, and hopefully some time will give him an opportunity to perhaps jump back onto this road to the Kentucky Derby.
Joaquin, as for East Avenue, that takes out one of his key contenders, but he's got his own obstacle. And that's the fact we haven't seen him since last year, and he's got to come back at 1 1/8. But every confidence is in his trainer, Brendan Walsh.
Yeah, he really didn't have that much time off after the Breeders' Cup as far as his rigorous training goes, because Brendan said he didn't really want to let him down too much to go ahead and make it easier to go ahead and gear him up for his 3-year-old debut. And that is a little bit of a wrinkle, since the Louisiana Cards have had that progression to get to the 1 3/16 distance of the Louisiana Derby. Yeah, coming back at 1 1/8, it's probably not ideal off the layoff, but I don't think it's really going to hurt East Avenue in any way. He's just a big, grand-looking son of Medaglia d'Oro. The 9 furlongs is not going to be an issue. The question is, all right, clearly this is just the starting point for him to get the ball rolling once again. How fit is he coming in off that brief freshening for his 3-year-old debut?
East Avenue already has a Grade 1 win, but there are horses in here trying to prove that they belong at the graded stakes level. Andy, you're with one of them right now. Shipping in for trainer Todd Pletcher is Vassimo. How has Vassimo settled in?
Oh, Vassimo has settled in awesome. Assistant trainer Sophie Green said he shipped in yesterday, went to the track today, had a nice gallop around, but he's just a very kind horse. He minds himself nicely, and he settled in perfect. He's eating his dinner. I actually do think he's a key contender. He broke his maiden nicely at Gulfstream Park, went on to go up to Tampa Bay Downs, which kind of has, that longer stretch configuration. But he beat quite a good group there at Tampa Bay Downs. My dad had a horse in there named Classic, of course, who we regard very highly. So Vassimo beat him. Classic, of course, came back and ran a really bang-up second, so that kind of flatters the form of that race even more. But Vassimo, I think, has the style to really excel at this track here at the fairgrounds, and I think it could set up with him for him. East Avenue is going to want to be forward. I imagine American Promise from the rail will be forward as well, so Vassimo might be able to just lay off the pace, but certainly a talented horse, and he looks good here, Todd.
Scott, let's go back to that dominating win by East Avenue in the Claiborne Breeders' Futurity last fall at Keeneland. He was awesome. Brendan Walsh has had some great horses over the years, most notably Maxfield, and he was already comparing this 2-year-old to a horse like Maxfield, who, quite honestly, physically is one of the most beautiful horses I've ever seen. And he delivered the expectations that Brendan Walsh had when he won at Keeneland last fall.
Yeah, he took it to him from the get-go, and he ends up winning this Grade 1 Claiborne Breeders' Futurity by 5.5 as he turns for home with a 4.5 length advantage. And I remember one of the things that a lot of folks talked about after this was watching him pass the wire, which we're not going to get a chance to see. And he wasn't slowing down; he was just hitting his best strides. I mean, he's basically geared down at this point in time, but yet he was so far advanced from a physical standpoint, obviously from a talent standpoint. And I think we just have to forget about the Breeders' Cup. I don't know how you all feel about this, but it reminds me of what happened to Dennis's moment in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile some years back when he was, I believe, the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he blew the start. Now Dennis's moment wasn't able to bounce back, and obviously that can happen. But I think the expectations have to be that this horse will bounce back, because after that Grade 1 Claiborne Breeders' Futurity, he would have been a top 2 horse in the early days of anybody's Kentucky Derby list if you were willing to put one together at that point in time.
I mean, this was mentioned by Scott earlier today, Joaquin, and that is that stumble after the Breeders' Futurity, that stumble in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile changed the entire division. It probably cost East Avenue an Eclipse Award. We'll never know, because Citizen Bull got out on the lead, took the field gate to wire, but we know that wouldn't have been the case had East Avenue broken well at the starting gate. I mean, so much was cost by one misstep in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile for East Avenue.
Yeah, I for sure agree that it did cost him an Eclipse Award, because at that time, that was the best 2-year-olds leading into the Breeders' Cup. They were all in the starting gate in the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. And really, no matter who won the FanDuel Breeders' Cup Juvenile, I think probably would have been the champion 2-year-old. It just happened to be Citizen Bull. Of course, his job was made easier when East Avenue stumbled. That was a horrendous beginning. It's just, his race was over in the first 3 or 4 jumps. He was just never able to regain any momentum after that. It's just not a true representation who East Avenue is. If you want to know who that East Avenue is, just go back and watch the Breeders' Futurity once again. That's him at the top of his game. Now the question is, have these other horses caught up to him? How much separation is there coming in for their 3-year-old debuts now?
Okay, let's talk about one of those horses built. Remember, it's a series of races at every region, but here at the fairgrounds, it starts with the Gun Runner, it goes to the LeCompte, the Risen Star, which you'll see on Saturday, and then the other huge points of the Louisiana Derby. But in the LeCompte, Scott, it was a difficult track to handle, and Built, a horse we're used to seeing on the lead, found himself kind of back and forth, and we kind of lost him coming out of the turn. All of a sudden, he reemerged, maybe not on the best part of the racetrack, and made it a race.
Yeah, he did. I mean, the other thing too, and we talked about this earlier, was the outside draw and the fact that he was able to work his way to the inside, because, you either have to do that or you have to really press the issue, which they obviously opted not to do from post 12 going into the first turn. So it was a strong performance, and his number that he earned in the Gun Runner is right there with East Avenue. So this is going to be really an intriguing matchup for me, and I think a lot of other folks, to see how Built compares to him. He's got recent races under his belt, obviously having those 2 starts between the end of his 2-year-old season and that race we just showed back to you. He's a good colt. He's run against East Avenue too. I mean, he ran against East Avenue on his debut, but I think it's safe to say, Keno, that he's gotten better since his career debut, which is oftentimes the case for any young horse.
Yeah, when did they match up in that debut? What is that, roughly maybe 6 months ago or so, roughly off the top of my head? Yeah, both of these horses, they're just completely different horses. And Todd, we talk so much about the seasoning for these horses. How much seasoning do they have going into the first Saturday in May? Isn't that a useful loss in the feet for Built right there? What did he do? Wide post position, got over to the inside. He was over a sloppy racetrack for the first time, so at least, he can have a good performance over a sloppy racetrack. Maybe ended up further back than he wanted to, and to show the determination to go ahead and come on again in the stretch. He didn't just pack it in. He was coming on and re-rallied and showed that interest in the stretch. So to me, sprinkle a little extra seasoning for Built right there for these young and lightly raced 3-year-olds. That's a useful loss for him, I still think, to keep the ball rolling and have him to keep progressing.
With all that seasoning talk, I thought we were talking about a crawfish boil, not a horse race. There is a rider change. Luis Saez, kind of interesting that the Catman goes to Luis Saez, Scott. I got to believe, because he wants this horse placed early in the race. I think he wants him right there with East Avenue.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, I think that based on what we've seen from him, he's a horse that has a lot of ability as far as getting that early position. And, I think part of it too is this goes to show you the high hopes they have for this horse. And this is no knock on Jareth Loveberry whatsoever. We saw Jareth ride a really nice race on two fills a few years back in the Kentucky Derby and ran a giant runner-up finish in that Kentucky Derby on two fills. So, but I think you're seeing, no pun intended, a little jockeying for jockeys at this point in time to try to, see if you can get one of these riders that's going to be highly coveted. Because, if you're looking at top five riders in the country, Flavian Pratt, Irad Ortiz Jr., his brother Jose, Luis Saez is right there, Johnny Velasquez obviously immediately comes to mind. I think you want to try to start getting yourself in line with these riders, and to me, that's what's going on with Built for the Eclipse Thoroughbred Partners and Wayne Catalano.
Well, it's what's going on with Vassimo. Irad Ortiz Jr. is in to ride. We mentioned the maiden win at Gulfstream Park. We'll get back to that in just a moment because that has been in the news. But what about the second start here? The debut at Gulfstream Park was a one-turn mile. This start at Tampa was a mile and 40 yards. How impressed were you, Joaquin?
I'm impressed from the standpoint of I think he has more to give. I think he's sort of playing around in the final eighth of a mile of his races. His ears are up. He seems to be looking around. He's just really winning on raw talent. I don't know if he's really focused on the task at hand going down the lane. Look, he only has 2 lifetime starts. He's clearly going to get better. He's clearly going to improve. And off the allowance win at Tampa Bay Downs, look, Todd Pletcher's done this before. Remember Always Dreaming in 2017? It was a maiden win, but he's used Tampa Bay Downs in Oldsmar, Florida as a stepping stone for his horses to go ahead and develop later on into the spring and into the first Saturday in May. I'm impressed with Vassimo from the standpoint of he's winning just on raw talent. I don't know if it's all put together for him just yet. And I think horses like Built in East Avenue, at least at this stage of the game, they're much further ahead of him.
All right, Scott, this is the existential conversation about Vassimo. He's been in the news because of his maiden win at Gulfstream Park under the HISA regulations. He came back with a medication positive. That is now being adjudicated. So again, there hasn't been a disqualification as of yet, but it's been put out there. How much of a distraction is that? And how much would you be concerned about it being a distraction for the connections of Vassimo?
I mean, I don't think it's a distraction. I mean, the connections obviously would weigh on Team Penny Stables and somebody of Todd Pletcher's stature, really any trainer for that matter, the personal aspect. But Vassimo doesn't know what's going on, right? Like he's not part of that. It's not as though we're in a different sporting situation where you may have something going on behind the scenes that would be weighing on, say an NFL quarterback or anybody in a team sport. So I don't think that it really would be a worry at all looking at it from what Vassimo is able to do. The thing that stands out to me with him is that big long stride of him and watching that replay again. I mean, he looks like a freak of nature, and he's by Nyquist, whose stock has never been higher. And obviously that's why he's standing for the fee in which he is going into this breeding season. And he's out of a mare, B Sharp Sonata, that Todd Pletcher trained, and she was a really nice race mare. She's yet to produce a stakes winner to date, but sometimes you see some of these older mares later in their broodmare careers get finally sort of put it all together, however it works out, and this colt could be that. And this looks like it's turned out to be a bit of a steal for these folks that bought this horse for $120,000 at the Keeneland September sale just a couple of years back.
Well, let's go to a horse that was purchased for $750,000 at the Keeneland September sale. Talking about D. Wayne Lucas sending in American Promise. If you looked at top 5 lists for Kentucky Derby prospects, people who follow it day in and day out, there's a name that's going to show up in the top 5 consistently. That is a horse that was second in the Southwest. That was Sandman. Now, American Promise got caught up in all the trouble that Sandman had at the start. He made a mess of things. But prior to that, this was his maiden victory at Oaklawn Park. I wish we had seen a better break in the Southwest for American Promise, because then we kind of know where we stand. So all we have to go off is this maiden win. Is there enough reason in your mind, Joaquin, for American Promise to take a shot here in the Risen Star?
I think one thing to note about this maiden win is look at the racetrack. It's over a muddy racetrack. Did he excel over the off racetrack and maybe some others didn't show up that afternoon? I think it's reasonable to go ahead and question that. The figure came back pretty big that maiden win as well. We generally see that with races that are run over off racetrack. I'm not sure. I know this. He's going to be involved in the early pace because he is fast. He has the inside draw. But we are going to hear from American Thomas going into the first turn because I think he's great if he breaks better than he did in his most recent start.
Scott, Dwayne Lucas had really the moment of the year in the end with that win by Seize the Gray and the Preakness. Obviously, he loves to take a shot on the Kentucky Derby Trail, on the Triple Crown Trail. Does he have a horse here worth looking at a price in the one American Promise?
Yeah, I don't think he's proven that he's at that level, right? I mean, I don't think he's at the level of East Avenue or Built. It took him a long time to break his maiden. I mean, this is Dwayne's system, though. He takes his shots, and I think that he's got to step up. Unless he just improves with the added distance and the pace being a little bit different for him at the first time going a mile and an eighth, I think he's got a lot to prove. But the start was a mess for him. I mean, it really was in the Southwest Stakes. So perhaps if you're willing to look the other way on that and feel that he's a horse that can bounce back, then sure. And he's going to be a pretty decent price. I mean, he'll be around 15 to 1, I would imagine.
Okay, let's take a look at the Gun Runner and the fact that Built won there, but there were other horses that had some pretty good efforts and then sat out the LeCompte. And talking about Magnitude, talking about Render Judgment, either of those horses appeal to you, having skipped the LeCompte and now waiting for the Risen Star?
Not necessarily. I really don't think that they've done anything that puts them there. I mean, unless they've gotten better, and from what we've seen from them in their recent training, Magnitude, he put together this big effort in the Gun Runner to finish second to Built. But I mean, you can see how much separation there is between these two horses in the fast track. And I mean, that to me, more than anything, that makes Built look even better tomorrow on the fast main track that we expect to get. And then here's Render Judgment too in the Gun Runner Stakes. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, this race was all about Built.
Yeah, it was all about Built here, Todd. And just quickly, Todd, in the Gun Runner, Magnitude was sitting off him with that slow pace, and Built just ran away with him. He just wasn't able to stay with him as he could. The only thing I'll say about Render Judgment and the Gun Runner, that was an awful beginning. On the subject of bad beginnings for these horses in the last 5 minutes or so, that was a really bad stumble that Render Judgment had in the Gun Runner Stakes that day.
Let's move on to Giacoso, because Keith DeSormo is no stranger to pulling off upsets in these series of races down here at the fairgrounds, and he also likes to find bargain purchases. Let's go back to the Iroquois. It'll be the first start as a 3-year-old for Giacoso, but in the Iroquois, he was third beaten 7 lengths, but it was to Jonathan's Way, who is expected to be one of the key contenders in this race. Does Giacoso deserve a long shot look in here, Scotty?
2 turns maybe is a positive for him. I mean, he's done his best running in his last few going 2 turns, but it's on turf. And here's a horse that's yet to win on dirt in circumstances that are a sprint, which clearly is not going to be his game. And then that grade 3 Iroquois where Jonathan's Way, was a freak going the 1 turn, which we've all seen, and we still need to see him get it done at 2 turns. But I think that, he's a long shot. If I'm playing him, Joaquin, it's because of Keith DeSormo and what Todd talked about and his ability at this stage in the Derby Trail to spring a big upset. It seems early in, January, February before we get to the big grade 1, grade 2 events.
And he's only had 2 races on the dirt, and he has a 3rd place finish. But that 3rd place finish, we just showed you, he was defeated 7 lengths. So to me, Todd, at least at this point of his career, he just seems like he's much better and suited for the ground.
Okay, let's talk about a horse coming up from Florida. That is Septarian for Resolute Racing. They like to participate in all the big races. Flavian Pratt is going to be aboard. The last effort for Septarian was in the Mucho Macho Man. I was at the Holy Bull, so I'll just make this comment. Guns Loaded, who won this race, was a massive disappointment in the Holy Bull. Should we look at Septarian any differently coming in here to the Risen Star now that we know about the winner of the Mucho Macho Man and how he flopped next time?
I don't see any reason to. I think the upside would be the addition of blinkers. I mean, just the change that's being made by Chad Brown in this instance, right, Kino? Because 25% of the time he's winning, and now obviously a majority of those 25% wins are not coming in Grade 2 races like this. You would imagine, but who knows? He's by Catonico. Let's not forget Medina Spirit was by Catonico, so he's had not a lot of runners, but he's not a bad stallion either.
Yeah, I think I can understand why they put blinkers on this horse when you see that backtrack right there, Todd. He looked like he wanted to lean in just a little bit. Maybe he's still attacking as well, maybe keep him straighter. And he was just sort of one-paced in the lane. He was a long, grindy type right there for Septarian in this spot. You mentioned that performance in the Holy Bull, Guns Loaded. Well, Treaty of Rome ran up to Sam F. Davis, Todd. He was up the track as well. So the top finishers from that race not come back to flatter the form out of the Mucho Macho Man.
Excellent point. That's almost a reverse key race. Let's talk about a horse who comes in under very different circumstances. Only synthetic starts for Chunk of Gold. He's been racing up at Turfway Park. Last time out, he was second, beaten 2.5 in the Leonada Stakes. So he's coming off his debut win at 6 furlongs on the synthetic. Then he goes a mile. He has his second. There are horses who will bounce out of those synthetic races, run on the dirt for the first time and run big. Is Chunk of Gold one of those horses, Scott?
I think he'd be an intriguing horse underneath. I mean, even amongst the ones that we've talked about out of what more well-known barns, and I think folks should be aware of who Ethan West is, and he's running a lot of horses and he's having a good amount of success. But he's a colt by preservationist who we've not seen a lot of stock by that stallion, but we've seen some horses run big races on dirt. And I know that you like the surface change aspect, and even in the early days, every time I see this, early days of synthetic really becoming a thing, we'd see a lot of conditioners use the synthetic race to catapult horses to big races on dirt. So from that perspective, I would be more drawn to him in a long shot as a long shot horse than a few of the other ones that we've talked about.
Joaquin, Tom Amos in here with Seattle Road, a horse that I was impressed by his maiden win. It took him a little try to get the first win of his career. I thought, we were talking about Built and how he didn't get the trip that necessarily he wanted. He made it close. I don't think this horse particularly liked the sloppy racetrack and still only lost by 3 3/4 lengths in the Lecomte with better conditions with a fast track expected for the Risen Star. How do you see Tom Amos's Seattle Road?
I could see, just like we could see the 5 Chunk of Gold maybe getting up there and catching a minor slice, I could see the exact same thing for the 6 in Seattle Gold. When we showed the backtrack of the Lecomte Stakes, the horse that was just to his inside in post position number 12, that was Built. He had a horrible draw. He was in post 13 in a field of 13. I never like that wide draw for a closer, especially when you're closer to the parking lot. You're essentially making a left-handed turn, running diagonal before you get in there to lose even much more ground going into the clubhouse turn. Look, getting back to a fast racetrack, it looks like it's going to be a very honest pace. The 9 furlongs long stretch, I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle Road can maybe fill out the tries and supers here.
Scott, another horse that, I think he didn't run nearly the race that Seattle Road ran in the Lecomte last time out, was Jolly Samurai. His better form was as a 2-year-old at Remington Park in the Clever Trevor. He went to the Springboard Mile, and how about the fact we are actually talking about the Springboard Mile as a decent race out of these horses' 2-year-old season into their 3-year-old season. Is Jolly Samurai a long shot that could figure maybe not to win, but somewhere on the board?
It's tough for me to think that he is, because, I know he ran in the Springboard Mile. He was expected to run better. Frankly, I think he was about third choice in that race, which Coal Battle won and Speed King won, 2 horses that have won the 2 big prep races at Oaklawn Park, the Smarty Jones and the Southwest Stakes recently. So I think that just a 2-turn question for him. I don't think he has shown any reason to think that he can get the 2 turns at this level against these types of horses.
Joaquin, a quick comment on Vamos Carlitos. He's quite a story. He was claimed for $40,000, but he was claimed by Greg Foley, and they got instant returns on this horse. They're taking a big shot. Does he belong?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he does it at this stage. The horse that he lost to for Vamos Carlitos in his most recent start on January 20th, Admiral Dennis. Admiral Dennis was a horse for Brad Cox that was actually supposed to run in the Lecomte Stakes. He scratched out of the Lecomte in favor for the allowance race on the 20th of January at the Fairgrounds. We're taking a look at his win here for 40 over Triple Downs. He grinded it out for 3/4 of the length. I still think he needs to improve quite a bit, though.
Okay, we've covered a lot of this field. Good job, guys, taking us into most of the horses who you could possibly think about. Let's get the bottom line. 50 points to the winner of the Risen Star, Scott Hazelton. Who's getting the 50 points?
I'm going to Built, and I'm going to
Wow.
the performance that we saw from him. I think the recency, I believe in him. I really do. And I love East Avenue. It's really difficult for me to pick between these two horses, but I think right now at the midpoint of February, at this point in time, slight edge to Built with those couple of races under his belt. I'll go to Built, the hometown horse here for the Catman.
Joaquin, who gets the 50 points in the Risen Star?
I'm going to East Avenue. He was the best 2-year-old that I saw in 2024. He didn't get an opportunity to show his best performance because of that bad stumble in the FanDuel Breeders' Cup Juvenile at Del Mar. I think after this race, we're going to be really talking about East Avenue leading into Saturday.
All right, those are the opinions from our analysts on the Risen Star, but it's not the only race with big points on the line and implications. The race before it, the 13th on the card, provides points to the Kentucky Oaks, and it's the same format. The top 5, a total of 105 points, 50 points to the winner. But once again, Scott, the big news early in the big race was a big scratch.
Yeah, Ballerina Doro not making the trip for Chad Brown from Payson Park where she's training, and she would have probably been second choice in here for Chad Brown and Flavian Pratt because of those connections and the fact that she'd run so well in the Grade 2 Demoiselle at the end of her 2-year-old season at 1 mile and 1/8 distance, and she was going to be shortening up here or on Saturday. But so with her being out, I hate to say it's a 2-horse race, but to me, it looks like it is. I mean, Good Cheer and Simply Joking are the 2 best fillies from a figure perspective, and Good Cheer undefeated. We all thought we would see Immersive be the highlight filly for Godolphin after what she did at the age of 2. But as we know, she's sidelined right now. They made the announcement some weeks ago that she would miss this journey to the Kentucky Oaks and focus on the summer. So this is a hell of an alternative for them to have a filly by Medaglia d'Oro from a really nice stakes winning mare that they have at Godolphin Wedding Toast. And she's done some big things in her 2-year-old season to go undefeated 4 for 4.
Yeah, and it's the margins that she won by, Joaquin. Good Cheer truly was not tested as a 2-year-old because it was kind of a conservative route for a Brad Cox horse with this type of pedigree for the reasons that obviously were mentioned there by Scott. How much confidence can we have in her since she hasn't really jumped in the deep water just as yet?
I think we can have a lot of confidence in her by the way that she is winning her races. I mean, she's been really impressive performance in all 4 starts, and she's just had a gradual progression to go ahead and take on tougher competition, jumping into Stakes Company in the Rags to Riches start 3. Then we're going to show you here the Goldenrod Stakes in her 4th career start. I really can't knock any of her performances or any of her wins. She's really, really good in 4 lifetime starts. She is a hard filly to knock.
How do we look at the late start, Joaquin, by Simply Joking? She does not start until December of her 2-year-old year. Now, to her credit, they come right back to start the year with a win in the Silver Bullet Day, but she's kind of playing catch up to those horses who had kind of a long 2-year-old season. But do you expect another move forward off the Silver Bullet Day?
Yes, I really do, because this is a very nice performance here. You're going to see Jaime Torres. He's going to the right-handed stick right here. She's going to take a few strides, and then she's just going to swap over to her left lead. I think she was telling the jock here, look, I'm in front. I'm cruising. Maybe caught her by surprise with just one more right-handed pop. She was well clear. She was in front of everybody already. That was a nice-looking win just off a 6-furlong maiden victory, which, by the way, came against Stakes Company, not Maiden Company, Stakes Company. She's 2 for 2 and a 2-time stakes winner. I like her in the Rachel Alexander, and I do think we do see another step forward by Simply Joking, Todd.
Scott, it turned out to be kind of an easy year last year determining who the best 3-year-old filly was. That was Torpedo Anna. Ken McPeak is back in this race, not with that type of talent, but he does have Anna Nima at the rail coming off back-to-back wins. He's not afraid to take a shot. How big of a shot is Ken McPeak taking here? Does she belong?
She belongs. There's no doubt. I mean, the last couple of races have been good, and she's a horse that she wins a maiden $100,000 claiming event. If that matters to anybody, it wouldn't be looked at as a maiden special weight win for what it's worth. But she beats Take Charge, My Lady, who came back out of this race to win the Martha Washington at Oaklawn Park on that Southwest Card Stakes Day as part of their journey for the 3-year-old fillies at this point in the year. So yeah, I think that she's a serious filly for them. And Gal's Delight is another one for Kenny. She was 4th in the Martha Washington, setting the pace that day. This is her maiden win right here at the fairgrounds, winning by 5.5 lengths. She won at 14-1. We'll see Kenny horses win on debut at 14-1 because they typically don't get bet, but she got better as this race went on. So yeah, I mean, Kenny, you can never sleep on him in any of these races.
Todd, I think you need to turn your camera upside the other way around.
He's gone upside down on us.
He's gone upside down.
Todd?
Todd, you there?
I think we've lost connection with Todd. So we've talked.
We can wrap it up, Scotty.
I think we can wrap it up, Keno. But yeah, I think that these races that we look forward to tomorrow are going to be great matchups, and there's always so much fun wherever we're at, whether we're at Oaklawn or at Santa Anita, Florida, here in New Orleans. You're bringing together the best of that region, and things are starting to get tighter, right? We're bringing together better and better horses each step of the way, and that's evident by what we're going to be seeing tomorrow in the Rachel Alexandra and the Risen Star.
And for the most part in mid-February, this is where you see some of the better 2-year-old males from the previous year really come back and start to gear up for their 3-year-old debuts, like East Avenue. When we were just talking about Good Cheer, I just realized, wow, what a weekend it could be for the sire Medaglia d'Oro. Sire of Good Cheer, sire of East Avenue. It could be a huge Saturday for that son of Medaglia d'Oro.
It absolutely could be, and looks like it's lining up to be. So with that, we'll say goodbye. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, Joaquin, for Risen Star Stakes Day. It'll be myself, Todd, Joaquin, Andy Biancone, Matt Bernier, and don't forget Joe Talamo will be providing his insights here at a track that has meant so much to him in his life. First post is 1 o'clock Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific. We got 14 races in total to look forward to tomorrow. Join us on FanDuel TV, and most importantly, make sure you've got that FanDuel Racing app ready. For Andy, for Todd, for Joaquin, for myself, Scott, we'll see you tomorrow.